Welcome to the Brave Feminine Leadership podcast, where I get to dive into delicious conversations with global leaders, and we get to share their perspective and wisdom on life and leadership. And today I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Angela Cross. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you, Melissa.
So let me step into your bio to help people understand who I'm talking to. So Angela Cross is a reputation strategist. And her own organisation, Pilot PR. So with more than 2 decades in corporate PR and crisis and issues management, Angela's led reputation programs for multinational businesses, built thought leadership strategies for businesses and leaders, and has been the driving force behind the successful creation of CEO and executive profiles. Today, she applies the asset-based approach, I can't wait to ask about that, to reputation, and she's utilised with her corporate clients to deliver results-focused multi-platform reputation strategies for 2 types of clients. So businesses that deserve recognition but don't have it yet, and leaders who deserve a space as a thought leader and want to be visible with ease and purpose. So I love that our conversation is going to be anchored all around visibility. But before we get to that, Angela, for the people in the audience who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you before, who are you as a human being?
Ooh, I was just saying to you before we started recording that I'd been giving this some thought, because it is like, there's a lot to it. I am a mum and a wife, and together with my husband, I have 3 gorgeous children, ages 11, 9, and 6. I am a business owner and a PR practitioner. I've been working in communications for more than 20 years. And in the past few years, I've really focused on that reputation aspect of communications for businesses and leaders. I am also a cook. I am fit. I'm a CrossFitter for the past 5 years. I love to knit. And I love the outdoors and I love the water.
Brilliant. So yum on the cooking. CrossFit sounds amazing, and all sorts of beautiful things tied up in there as well. So visibility, I'm pretty passionate about visibility as well. Why does it matter?
It matters for businesses. It matters for businesses that want to be known for the great work that they're doing, and as a growth aspect to help their business grow. For leaders, it's a state of play today. It's a requirement that leaders are visible so that the people that they lead and their stakeholders and the industry know how they lead, what their business stands for, and what their expertise is.
And let's talk about females and visibility. I mean, you don't just exclusively focus on females, right? But obviously, that's a core focus of what I do in terms of let's get more female CEOs and all those sorts of things. But are females visible enough?
In a word, no.
It was a leading question, right?
And while I do both, I work with both, men and women leaders to build their visibility. Helping women build their visibility is something that I am extremely passionate about, because women leaders aren't visible enough for myriad reasons. And it's really important that they are visible. One, because so many female leaders have just as much, potentially more expertise to share than some of the other male leaders that are out there and are highly visible and very credible and thought leaders in their own space. But as we support more women to be in leadership roles, we need to support more women to be visible with that leadership.
So I want to go back though, and I want to kind of navigate through, how did you get here? So, I know people in the audience really love hearing people's own career stories. So would you take us through yours? How did you get into the space you got into in the first place? What was the attraction to all of that? And talk us through where you've been and what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. I studied at university, started working in, traditional PR, media relations roles, at first in banking, so local banks, global banks, and then I spent some time in the not-for-profit sector, which I really loved. So I loved, having a story to tell that really had, purpose and a reason behind it needing attention. And then I moved into consulting, and I worked for a number of PR consultancies in the not-for-profit space, but also in the corporate and reputation space. So working with, Australian and global businesses that needed to build their reputation, but also had a strong issues management need, just because of the business that they were in, whether it was insurance or construction or anything like that. So really looking at whole of business reputation aspect for them. And that included building the profiles of their leaders. And then when I had my first child, I had an opportunity to work directly with some of the clients that I'd worked in my consulting roles, and also do some work for a previous boss that I'd had. And that just really appealed to me. Had a husband who worked in a large role, and just to be able to keep doing work that I loved.
Yes.
And keep progressing my career, but shape it around how my family was taking form.
Yes.
And so I started out, consulting to those, types of clients. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I had an executive referred to me who had been the director of a company that had been found guilty of investor fraud, and he was named in media coverage. And he'd done what so many executives do when they're in they gain attention via negative media coverage, and he just receded from any form of visibility.
Right.
But what that does when someone has that experience is that Google remembers the last big thing that happened.
Yes.
And even though this event had happened 10 years ago, when you put his name into a search, all of this media coverage came up. And 10 years on, he deserved to move on and put that behind him. He was a really authentic and honest and dedicated executive who was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And so we started working together, and it just started an idea that I thought that there are probably other leaders out there who aren't in as an extreme situation as what he was, but who would like help because they're overloaded, and quite frankly, they've got a business to lead and they've got other things to do, but they're feeling this pressure because they know that it's expected that they need to be visible, and their stakeholders need to know who they are, what they stand for, how they lead. And so I tested it with other leaders, clients, prospective clients, people I trusted and knew, to say, this is what I'd like to specialize in. What do you think? And I got really positive response, which was great. And so that's sort of what started where my business is today.
How fascinating. And I mean, I've got so many questions about that, and thank you for sharing that story of the executive that you worked with. What often prompts people? I mean, I'm just going to call out some stats about women and visibility first, right? Before we go there, and then I'll go back to that question. But I imagine, looking at your client base, you've got businesses that deserve recognition. So they're looking to scale and grow. But then you've got executives at very senior levels in very senior organizations that you work with. And I've taken some stats from the ASX 300. So it's from the Chief Executive Women Executive Census report that comes out. It's from last year because their new one's not out yet. But it talks about 7 in 10 exec roles are held by men. 82% of CEO pipeline roles, so typically that's Chief Operating Officer, someone with a P&L accountability, or the CFO, so 82% of them are held by men, and 91% of CEOs are men. So even when you look at that stats from a female perspective, I mean, it's going to be harder to be visible to start with. But what often prompts people, if we're talking about executives, what often prompts them to reach out? What prompts them to think about their visibility?
Usually it is either someone who is in, say, a senior level, but not yet C-suite roles, so general manager, director level role, who is pinpointed as likely to be promoted into the C-suite, but they've been told that they need to be more visible, either with internal audiences or externally. And they're already really busy. They've got a really big job. They've likely got a really full home life. And so they need a trusted advisor in the background to say, look, this is how you do it. This is where you need to be visible. This is how you can do it so that it's comfortable for you. Because a lot of the reason that we talk about this work and we talk about visibility is because for a lot of people, it's highly uncomfortable. And when you're overloaded, it's really easy to, push it down the list of priorities. But you'll have someone who said, okay, well, if I want to take that next step in my career, if I want to break into the C-suite, I've got this KPI or I've got this target, it's really time to make this happen. So there's that aspect. Otherwise, you may have a leader, and if we're talking about, for female leaders, you may have someone who was already in the C-suite and had a highly successful career, and they're building a boardroom career.
Okay.
They may have what you'd call a non-traditional background to get into those boardroom roles, but they've got a lot of value to add. They're highly expert. Their expertise adds a more diverse perspective to the expertise and knowledge that's going to be in that boardroom. But that non-traditional background has been something that's holding them back. So how do they own that non-traditional background and really position it as an asset for them, rather than something that they almost need to apologize for? And then you'll have women who are leading a business who potentially it's their own business, or, they're the managing director of a business, and that business is growing and it's had a really great growth experience over the past however many years, but it's time for the business to take that next step, and they need to be visible beyond their direct network or beyond their industry, and they want advice on how to do that and how they do it with authority and without, spending time figuring out how to do it along the way.
Okay. When someone's given a KPI of visibility, can you break that down? Like what are they really being asked to do? And I'm going to ask the question kind of directly, because is there any element of executive presence in that, or is it a very different thing?
It's a different thing in terms of it's generally looking at, it can be both internal visibility, so visibility across the business with your team, with other departments, with the executive, potentially with the board as well. But it can also, and a lot of the time, it's external visibility. So it's what are you doing on LinkedIn?
Okay.
You can't just be there liking other people's posts and maybe sharing the odd company post. And it doesn't have to be, completely full-blown thought leadership from day one. But how are you, being visible on an external platform like that to showcase your visibility and your knowledge and how you lead? But it also could be, how are you participating in industry events? Are you there, sharing your knowledge and expertise on panels or looking at speaking opportunities? Would you like to build a profile in the media? And it doesn't necessarily have to be the AFR or the Australian or any of those, tier one national mastheads. But if it is, then great. But it could also be, would you like to build a profile with your industry's trade media or be on podcasts? It's very individual. And it really depends on what the goal of being visible is, which is where it really all starts. So I tend to work with clients in a highly confidential capacity, and we have those conversations about, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? Where do you want to be in 10 years' time? What are your values? What do you think sets you apart as a leader? Who do you see in your industry as being visible, and what are they already talking about, so that we can position you apart from them and you can really own a space?
Okay, so you've mentioned along the way some of the typical barriers that get in the way, and I think one I heard was time. But what are the typical barriers when someone's given this, we need you to be more visible, you need to be more visible, or however they get there? What gets in the way of it?
Time, absolutely. Another really common one is that leaders tend to just not know where to start, because it can feel quite overwhelming. And we often tend to think that if I'm going to be visible, then I have to do it all. So I have to be on LinkedIn, I have to be in the media, I have to be speaking at events, I have to be, running town halls within my company and that kind of thing. But it doesn't need to be all or nothing like that. And it really can be something that you build over time. So it's really sort of knowing who you need to be visible with and where that audience is and what you want to be saying to them. And sort of if sort of not knowing where to start and time is an issue for you, then starting small and getting comfortable with that and building up larger visibility over time. Another barrier is often leaders will have been burned before. So they may have given a media interview that didn't go well, or given a media interview where they said something that they shouldn't have, and they sort of got wrapped over the knuckles for
Can't
it.
escape it.
Yeah, exactly. And they think, I'm just never going to do that again. And another barrier can be, I don't know what to say, because often we see a lot of the leaders who have been doing this work for years, potentially decades, and it looks like they're everywhere and they're being visible in some form every single day. And the story that we tell ourselves is that that's what we need to do to be visible, but that's actually not the case. And what's your point of view? What are you going to start to be visible with, that you're going to feel comfortable with, and is really a core area of expertise for you that you can speak about easily, and that's going to feel like you're being visible, but in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Okay, so where do you start with people? I mean, one of the things you do is try and work out what the goal is, but if someone's going to do this, how much time should they invest? And is this something that, I guess this is how long's a piece of string question, but can it pay back quickly if you go hard and fast on it, or, what does it look like?
Look, I think it can. I've absolutely had clients where their visibility, just by doing some simple things, their visibility lifts much more rapidly than what they anticipate it will, because you're probably talking about leaders who may do the occasional thing on LinkedIn, may have done, a media interview or two over the past couple of years, but there's not that sort of regularity and discipline around it. So I've had clients who've been told that they go from nowhere to everywhere. And that may be that their two main platforms that they've chosen to be visible on is, say, LinkedIn, or the social media that is right for them, and in the media. But visibility breeds visibility. So if you're speaking to the media and your comments appear in an article for that media outlet, that's then content for you to take to LinkedIn and social media and share there.
Okay.
So yeah, that's sort of really where it starts, is where do you want this to take you? Because it needs to have a purpose for you, and you need to have a goal, because otherwise you won't stick with it, even though you think that it's valuable. What are your areas of expertise? What sets you apart as a leader? and then what's already being spoken about in your industry, because you don't want to build your visibility on topics that are already oversaturated, because
Yes.
there's no point sort of shouting into a noisy room. You want to pick the topic areas that are right for you, but also topic areas that aren't already being spoken about by everyone else, so that you can really own a space and develop a profile. And I have clients who want that thought leader profile, really develop a thought leader profile on that topic area.
You asked some really fascinating questions in there, and I know from a lot of the work I do with a lot of leaders, they're very hard to answer. So the answer of what sets you apart. How much time do you spend with people on that one question? Or am I wrong? Do people have a
Okay.
stronger understanding?
Actually, the one thing that I do when I'm first working with leaders is not just get their opinion.
Yes.
And so I will confidentially speak to, colleagues, managers, anyone that they trust, because it's really hard for any of us to see ourselves accurately.
Totally. Yeah.
And a lot of the time, those sort of stakeholder perspectives are really insightful in terms of how someone is perceived. And a lot of they will come back with observations on strengths, or, the what sets that person apart that that person hadn't necessarily seen themselves, or may not have had the confidence to say, okay, this is really what I'm going to start being visible on, and almost sort of gives you permission to go and be visible on that area.
Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? It's so much easier to lean on what other people say. Yeah, like number one, it gives you a lens on it as well, but also then to be able to kind of say, well, people see me like this. Because I think there's a huge cultural thing about people don't want to talk themselves up either.
Oh, absolutely, especially in Australia. And
Yes.
that's, and when we're talking about barriers, that's a barrier that comes up, is that a lot of the people who want to do this work, and they want to do it in a way that has value for the people that they're trying to engage, but they feel really uncomfortable having the spotlight on them, and they don't want to look like they're just doing it for attention. They want to
Yes.
do it in a way that adds value.
How do you nurture someone through that?
Um, oh, gosh, starting small for someone whose barrier is the discomfort with having the spotlight on them. It really is a ladder approach to say, okay, we're not going to throw you in the deep end and it's all or nothing, and you've got to get up on stage and, speak at this event and do this media interview. It's like, okay, where can you start that is going to feel, I'm not going to say comfortable, because so often it's not, but where do you feel like you can start, and let's get you comfortable there. And then, we know that these other target platforms or channels are where we're going to build to next. And we've got our eye on getting there. And over time, we just sort of, take you from here to there.
So tell me what drives your passion for this space that you operate in. What do you love about it?
Well, I love working with women, because we need more female leaders, and we need more female leaders to be visible. But often I work with the people who have a barrier in front of them. And so often it's those people who have the most value to add. Because they're the ones, thinking deeply about who they are, what it means to lead, about the business that they're leading, about their people and that kind of thing. And so they're going to be very considered in the visibility that they do for themselves and for their business.
You made me think as soon as you said that about, have you read Jim Collins' Good to Great?
No.
So it talks in there, well, it just talks in there about a level 5 leader. And a level 5 leader is not the extroverted, Like there's leadership archetypes and things like that, and I think we've moved well past that kind of big, boisterous, big personality kind of CEO or leader. And it's much more about they're humble, they're driven, they're ambitious, but they're humble. And I imagine that sounds like quite a lot of the people that you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when, yeah, I would say that all of my clients would have those qualities. And I can even take it to the clients that I work with where I'm building the visibility of their business as well. They're growing rapidly because they're doing amazing work that a lot of the time, their clients or their customers see as really high value. They're over delivering in that aspect. And so that's going to overflow, and they're going to over deliver in the thought leadership that they do, in the communications work that they do. Offering value is a core importance for them.
So there's so many elements to what you're doing, I imagine, based on that goal. So, I'm as I'm listening, I'm kind of thinking, like, does that include media training? Does it include helping them write articles? Like, to what extent do you kind of support people?
Look, it really depends. It probably depends on whether time is their number one barrier.
Yeah.
Some clients I work with just to do their strategy and say, okay, that you want to be visible. This is the audience that you want to engage. This is where you want your visibility to take you. Let's create a strategy for you that's going to show you where you're going to be visible, what your core topics are, and what success looks like for you.
Yeah.
Then there'll be clients that I do that with and then also help them get started, because it's often highly uncomfortable. And so how do we make that happen for you? What's that going to look like? Are you going to be visible on LinkedIn? Are you going to be visible with the media? Is it going to be me pitching you for some interviews, helping with anything that you're going to be writing for social media? Would you like me to help you write some opinion pieces that are then going to be pitched out to your industry's media, business media, whatever it is? And then there's clients who really just don't have the time, and they'll bring me in to look after building the visibility of their business and either their leader or their executive team, because you need some synchronicity to happen when you've got an executive team that each needs to own their space, but they also need to work together to elevate each other's visibility and elevate the visibility of the business that they're leading.
So, well, this is a whole world I don't know very much about. So it's fascinating to kind of get a sneak peek into that. I talk a lot to people about brand, and I'm not a brand expert, but I guess this is brand, right?
It is brand. And what I find is that there's a number of people, a large group of people who are uncomfortable talking about personal brand.
Yeah.
And they see that they do need to be visible, and they need to build their reputation, and they need to be known by certain audiences. But talking about themselves as a brand feels a step too far.
Yeah. So visibility is a gentler way.
Yes, I'd say so.
Yeah. So a gentler way of saying I need to build my visibility and make sure that it's very authentic and very comfortable for me and kind of supports me to achieve my broader goals. And I know you can't talk about clients, I'd never ask you to, because it's the kind of the beauty of what you do. You sit behind the scenes on all of this. But do you have a favorite success story, or is there something that you would kind of call out?
Oh gosh, I have. It's hard. It's hard to pick just one.
Yeah.
I love working with some of the women that I've worked with, really giving them permission to be visible and watching their visibility and really taking that diverse aspect of their background, whether it's the non-traditional background that I mentioned before, or whether they're just sort of trying to break into a new area or take that step up from, you know, the GM level to CEO level, and giving them almost permission to own their expertise and to own that expertise and be visible with it, and have that be a critical aspect of their success, whether they're looking to secure positions on the boards of larger companies that they haven't been able to break through previously, or break into media and event opportunities that they haven't been able to get to before because they haven't known how to pitch themselves, or they haven't known how, sort of what topics they really should be pitching themselves on to set themselves apart. And then, look, the businesses that I really love working with are the ones who are almost their industry's best kept secret. So, like I said before, I have had clients being told that they go from nowhere to everywhere because they're absolutely networking and they've got a really good name within their industry, but they're not taking that visibility to those broader platforms where they need to be because their potential customers and clients are there, or they have a goal of, you know, they might have a profile and their trade media comes to them and speaks to them, but they say, no, actually, I need to get into decision maker red media. So I want to be in the AFR, or I want to be in the Oz. I'd like to be a commentator on this topic, and really working with them to make those goals that they have a reality.
So it sounds like your role's a bit like it must be fascinating because you're jumping across so many different industries and spaces, but a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle that you're pulling together. And you've created this incredible business focused on what you love. And I know you shared earlier the great opportunity you've had that coincided with your family to kind of explore that. Is there part of you that, like, if you look back into the corporate space and the roles that you had in the corporate space, was there a career path for you that you could have taken?
Absolutely. I think that I would have moved further into management positions with the consultancies that I worked with, which really did appeal. And I was very much heading, you know, for that career path, and that would have worked. But I just had this quite individual opportunity come my way, which really diverted my career in a way that I didn't expect.
So you had this once in a lifetime opportunity to reconnect with someone and all those sorts of things. So the question I'd ask for you was it luck, or given the work you do, was there an element of visibility that made it happen?
Look, probably, but you know, like so many of the clients that I work with, I'm an introvert. So it was probably very quiet visibility.
Yes.
That I just, you know, I tended to work with clients and still do for a really long time.
Yeah.
And so I had those relationships with those senior clients, which meant that I could sort of take the leap that I had, and, you know, obviously worked well with different people over time, which meant that I could do the other work, you know, that I was doing. So yeah, in a way, but just not that sort of talking to the media, kind of social media visibility, which I do now, but, you know, didn't do back then.
Do you get any insight? So when you're working with executives who are obviously talented and on succession plans, if they're working with you, do you get any feel about, you know, any potential barriers for them moving into senior leadership roles? Does that come up as part of your conversations?
What do you mean by barriers?
Well, when we're talking earlier about the stats coming out of the ASX 300 and, you know, the kind of glacial pace of movement for females into those roles, do you get any clues or insight just in terms of the people you're working with, or are you working with a unique group of people in that space who that's the path they're on, they're not doubting it, and away they go?
Yes, I think that that's the case, because often when I'm working with those clients who are looking for that next step in their career, and that's the reason that they're building their visibility now, they have the support of senior people around them, or select people to say, you're worthy of this role, or you're worthy of, taking your business to that next growth phase. You need to back yourself and do this and be visible because, I believe in you.
It's so important. And, when I think about from all the work I do, I think there's kind of 8 critical areas that matter as far as stepping up into a lot of these roles. And you nailed, network and the sponsors that you've got supporting you, enormous. What would you say to someone who doesn't have that? So perhaps hasn't invested in their network to the extent that they should have. Maybe they regret that they haven't nurtured that as well as they could. And I say it's never too late to kind of start and to reinvest in that space. But they haven't got an obvious sponsor who's championing their growth, yet they are ambitious. They think that by increasing their visibility, it's going to help them. Where would you suggest they start?
I would suggest that they start by paying attention to the people who they think are doing a really good job of being visible, being highly networked, and learning from them about what they think, what aspects of what that person is doing they could take into the visibility work that they end up doing.
Yeah.
So is that person really good at building relationships? Is that person really good at championing the work of their team internally and showing the results and impact of the work of, and really lifting their team up? Because I have done work where I might start working with a leader, but then they'll bring me in to work with their team and work on their internal visibility or external visibility to really show the organizational impact of what they're doing. And that sort of foundational work is really important because it gives you insight into when you're ready to be visible in no matter what form that's, or what is your visibility, how is it going to take form? So what's going to be comfortable for you and what's just a hard no, or a hard no for now. And really sort of pay attention to that aspect of what you like with what some people do with their visibility and then what you don't. And then it's really that kind of career path piece of, okay, so you'd like to be better networked or you'd like to be more visible, but where do you, no matter what you do, where do you want it to take you?
Yes.
And do you want to be a CEO? Well, maybe it's time to look at incorporating some visibility so that you're almost operating at CEO visibility level when you're ready to step into that role, rather than something that, you catch up on when you do achieve that milestone.
That is fantastic advice. You made me think about, I used to actually say that when I, as a leader, before I was CEO, as I inherited new teams, I would often say to them, I see part of my role as being PR for the work you do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
so that people understood the value that others were bringing. So that is fabulous advice on a whole range of different fronts. We could keep talking forever, but I do want to ask you, because I'm curious, from your perspective, what does brave feminine leadership mean, and do you think it needs to change?
Brave feminine leadership means visible leadership. And absolutely, yes, I think that it needs to change. There are so many female leaders out there who have a wealth of expertise and knowledge to share. And I see it as being twofold in terms of when you're talking about women leaders being visible. One is that it's going to help them to be better leaders because more of their audience and stakeholders are going to know who they are, what they stand for, and how they lead.
Yes.
And it's going to help them to achieve their career goals if their goal is to, get onto the executive team, get into the C-suite, break into the boardroom. But what it also does is that shows the women who are going to follow them what's possible.
Brilliant.
And to have the confidence to be visible in their leadership, whether they're 5, 10, 25 years into their career.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining our conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think there's some really terrific practical advice for people. So I'm just so grateful for you for joining the conversation today, Angela.
No, thank you for having me, Melissa.